Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of 10,000 Heroes. I'm your host, Ankur Shah Delight. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the show. This is episode 00104, 104 of the 10,000 Heroes show. Welcome back to the club. And today I had a little lark earlier today, and I gave myself an assignment, and today's episode is the result. But before I get into that, I just want to share a little story. I talked to an old friend yesterday, and she's a super smart lady. She's worked in technology for many years and is at this high-level position of this prominent organization. And we were talking, and she told me, every time I zoom out and look at the bigger picture of what my work is about, I feel like shit. Which is exactly the opposite of what I'm advocating for, and I would say exactly the opposite of what it means to have a real sense of purpose in what you're doing. And I mean, the whole point is that when you're not feeling well or you're doing tasks that you're like, oh, I really don't want to be doing this, to be able to zoom out and be like, wow, this is the why, and the why is beautiful, and I'm inspired, and I'm enthusiastic, and I'm like, yeah, once more into the breach, dear friends.
Once more unto the breach, dear friends.
And if that's not the feeling, well, then that means we've got a little bit of work to do. So that happened. But what I want to focus on today is thinking a little bit more about what dimension of this purpose I want to investigate, or what's currently top of mind for me. So I gave myself a little assignment, which is, if I were going to write a book on purpose today, and I invite you to conduct the same assignment, if you were going to write a book on purpose today, what would be in it? What would be included? And this is what I came up with. And look, I even did a little bit of formatting. So I just want to go over this. That's going to be what I'm doing today. And make my case for why your purpose, your individual purpose, could be essential for human evolution. So if I were to write this book today, there would be 5 parts and 16 chapters. That's what I have here. And the first part would be just introducing the idea of purpose. And I would start with this cocktail party in the future. And maybe there's like flying cars and skateboards, and just like, I'm thinking of the fifth element in terms of the dresses and the costumes and everything. And of course, there's like the AI overlords that control everything. And everyone who does not have a vocation that is fully embedded in their purpose has been replaced by some kind of robot. So maybe there's a lot of robots at the cocktail party, and all the robots have British accents, because that's how it is in my mind.
Once more onto the breach, dear friends.
The important thing about this cocktail party is that when you go to the cocktail party and you've got your little robotic champagne glass or whatever people are drinking in 20 years, and you meet someone new, or you bump into someone, or you're introduced to someone new, the question is not, where are you from, or what is your job, which is just a coded question about status or marriageability or something like that. But it's really like, so, why are you here? Or like, oh, what's your purpose? And there's none of this squeamishness or yuckiness or ungrooviness associated with that kind of question. Today would be like, dude, who's the weirdo asking that question? Where it's really like, yeah, that's what we're here to do as humans, is connect and understand what this person is essentially about, how I can contribute to their lives, and how they're contributing to my life and to the whole. So that's the preface. And chapter 1 of the book on purpose would be, of course, what is purpose? So we define our terms a little bit like what I did last week in the podcast, of coming up with the shared language and understanding of what purpose is. So that's something we've done before here, but that would have to be in the book, I think, just to start from the basics and define our terms. Chapter 2 of our book on purpose would be, purpose is dead, long live purpose. And the idea would be to put this quest for purpose in its historical context of how purpose was associated with dogma and with religion for oh so long. And then we came along and like totally killed religion, for the most part, for many of us who are listening to the show at least. And then we're like, oh, but I don't have any meaning in my life. What happened? And then we're like, all right, this is how we rescue this notion of meaning and purpose from having been associated with religion this whole time, so we get the good stuff without all the gnarly stuff. So that's our little rescue mission in chapter 2. And then we get to part 2, which is why purpose matters, and there's 2 chapters in it. So chapter 3 why my purpose should matter to me. And there's 3 answers there: happiness, sexual potency, and infinite wealth.
10 hours straight. He's a machine.
Of course, I had to add those last 2 because otherwise no one's going to read it. Because if it's just about happiness, then like nobody really cares about that, right? But the real point is to provide a pragmatic motivation to help us understand how having a sense of purpose could actually change our lives and not just be some kind of theoretical belief or like, oh, that's really nice. But actually, the whole point is that this should make us happier. Otherwise, like, why go through the rigmarole? And chapter 4, kind of similarly, is applying that on a collective scale to our society. So it would be why my purpose matters to us, world peace and human potential. And that's where I make the argument that every single person living their purpose provides a necessary contribution that accelerates what's going on here in terms of humans. We get beyond all the conflicts that we've so nicely created for ourselves, and then we can go through them because the only way out is through to the other side. So that's more, if the other chapter 3, was the pragmatic motivations for purpose and how to be a happier person, chapter 4 is more of the ideological motivations, purpose of how to have a better world, right? And how human evolution as a whole is related to each individual's sense of purpose and accomplishment. Part 2. Part 3 is the more of the how-to section on finding your purpose. And there's a few chapters in there. Chapter 5, what purpose feels like. And we did a little bit of this in the episode last week of taking it from being some sort of theoretical notion of purpose and a mystical thing of, oh yes, you'll just know because Jesus will appear in front of you and there'll be like butterflies and little hearts and you'll feel purpose, to more of like, all right, what does it actually mean, nuts and bolts, in terms of your sensations and your thoughts every day and your attitude when you're actually living your purpose and when you're not. So that becomes the evaluative criteria. Then you have some sort of framework for knowing whether you're living your purpose or not. And then chapter 6 is the whole method of how to find your purpose, which you start in the beginning by evaluating, like, how do I feel? Evaluating according to what we talked about in chapter 5. And then you do the like methodology for finding your purpose. You run the experiments that we talk about. And then after running those experiments for months or years, then you evaluate again. And you're like, oh, this is actually working, or this is not working, or not feeling the way I want it to feel. Chapter 7, purpose and time. And this is where we talk about how purpose evolves over time. And what does it mean if I had a certain sense of purpose 5 years ago and it's different now? Does that mean that was all bullshit? Or how does purpose relate to evolution and time? And of course, in my mind, and we probably talked about this, but it's an iterative method. So the idea is that you get closer with every experiment and every understanding and every formulation to the hidden truth that has been there all along. And we're just like these little excavators getting closer and closer to it. Chapter 8, how to use purpose. So this part I think is really important because it's not just like, all right, I got my purpose statement, I'm golden. The idea is that becomes a real asset. In my work, I call it an amulet of protection. And we can really use that to protect ourselves from fear and doubt and uncertainty, self-criticism. It can really change how we relate to ourselves, our mood, how we relate to other people. It can provide a focus for how we grow and build community. And perhaps most practically or most importantly, it becomes the basis of a decision-making framework. So you actually have a rational way of making decisions that's not based on somebody else's goals or what society thinks is important, but what you really want and who you want to be and what you want to accomplish. Chapter 9 is about purpose and heroism. So what I wrote here is how living your purpose is related to heroism and what's really going on internally when we investigate our purpose. So there's a couple aspects here. One is like unlocking our imagination, which can only be done when we have a clear self-concept. But the deeper thing in this chapter, and of course I have to sneak this in into anything that I'm going to write, is that it has to be about our relationship with ourselves. So this chapter is where I sneak in all the self-love and self-acceptance and self-concept. You know, it's right in the middle of the book. Hopefully the heart is open by that time.
Open your heart.
The argument behind the argument is why we should take loving ourselves seriously. All right.
Once more into the breach, dear friends.
Part 4, I call this the traps. And so there's 4 different traps here. There's the generality trap, the specificity trap, the enlightenment trap, and the Midas trap. Chapter 10 is a generality trap. And so I see this a lot with our clients. Someone does the purpose work and they're like, my purpose is to help people. You failed! Or my purpose is to be myself. And so what we'll talk about in the generality trap is like, if you come up with a purpose statement that has nothing to do with how you're different from other people. And every other person could like wear the same hat and be like, yeah, dude, my purpose is to be myself. Then maybe there's some more work to do, and talk a little bit about why that trap happens and what are the effects of it if we fall into it. The next trap is in some ways the opposite or the complement, chapter 11, the specificity trap. And this is if you're like so attached to a certain thing that you then lose perspective of what your actual potential is. Because if you're like I wrote here, my purpose is to be an extra innings pitcher for the Oakland A's, then it becomes so vulnerable to changes out of your control that it's more of a dream than a purpose. Because if something happens to your hand, or for some reason you get blacklisted from Major League Baseball, or if you discover this when you're 43 and there's no shot you got at it, then you're just doomed to live your whole life without purpose. I don't think so. That's against the first axiom of it, which is that you'll have it forever. So the idea is that the purpose should be specific enough that it's just you, but general enough that you can't like get yourself into a box or a trap where you're like, now I can't do anything. So those are the two traps, generality and specificity. The next is the enlightenment trap, which you get a lot, especially from all you people who think you're enlightened, which is, oh, dude, my purpose is just to be here right now and not have any goals. And I love talking about that. We'll get into that. And the last of the four traps is the Midas trap, which is my purpose is just to make money and support my family, which is important. And we go back to our homie Maslow and how those are like really important baselines, but it's not at the top of the pyramid. So stop kidding yourself. All right. And the fifth section, I call it after purpose. There's a few chapters. One is about connecting the dots between purpose and actually doing things. I call it how to do anything. And it goes over like all of the Momentum Lab concepts of how to go from purpose to vision to consistency. So it just like outlines that whole strategy. I mean, you could have a whole other book just on that, but this is just what I would write today if I wrote a book on purpose, and it would be incomplete without grounding it in everyday life. Chapter 15, this whole after purpose section is about that. Chapter 15, downscaling purpose and vision, gets more specific on the relationship between vision and, as we like to call it, supernaturally sharp vision and purpose, and what it looks like to have a vision that's grounded in purpose. And then the last chapter, it can't really be the last chapter because there's got to be some sort of like, oh, let's tie this all up with a bow and it'll be perfect and everyone is happy. But the last more content chapter would be about consistency. Again, so it just draws this line between purpose and then vision and then consistency, including some of the real pitfalls of what happened when you get thrown off consistency and how to get back on the horse. And then, then there'd be this other like tie it all together chapter. So that's what I did today. I didn't write the book, but I wrote the outline of the book. And this is, this is an offering. This is an opportunity. We could investigate these topics together over the next few weeks. And I'd also be very, very curious if you were to write a book on purpose right now, what would be included? And specifically, what would be included that's not on this list, so then I can add it. Thank you. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for being here, being part of the 10,000 Heroes Club. Thank you for opening your heart. I'm going to be going on vacation for a little while, so you may not hear from me next week. And then I've got a bunch of awesome interviews on the calendar that you and other listeners have suggested. So keep those coming, and I'll talk to you soon. If you like this episode, you can join the 10,000 Heroes Club, our own community of purpose, by clicking the link below this video. You'll never miss an episode. You'll have opportunities to nominate the people I interview and the questions I explore. But perhaps most importantly, you'll have an opportunity to share your dreams and your needs in a safe space of mutual intention and trust.